All right, so welcome back to a podcast about names and other stuff. We continue this idea of what is a name? What does a name tell us about a person? What does a name tell us about who we are even? Today we're going to begin looking at this discussion with a friend of mine. I'm not going to tell you his name because I want you to listen and find out. But he is interesting. And if you know him, that is an understatement. He is an interesting human being. And so I hope that you will enjoy this journey we're on together. And I hope that as we do this, you will ask yourself, what is a name? What are my names? How do they affect me? How have they shaped me? How have they made me who I am? Or how have I fought against these names in my journey of life? So let's go ahead and catch up and get in here right now with this conversation between myself and this friend of mine.
Okay, so I am here with my friend, and I'm going to not say your name because the way it works, the way we do this, is that you're going to get to tell everybody because we are exploring names. But before we have you say that, all right, you can make sounds. You can. I almost said your name.
I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, you can,
okay,
you can make
sure.
sounds.
All right, I can make sounds, but I can't tell my name yet.
Yeah,
All right.
not yet. But
right.
I have a quote to start off our time together right
Okay.
now. This is a quote from James Baldwin. It says, "Love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within." I think that's a good fitting one just on what I've heard from your story so far and what I know of you. As we talk about your name and your names you carry, I think that there has been an element of that, of many different times that you have taken off and put on and taken off masks,
Yes.
or hats, or however you want to refer to them.
Yeah, sure.
Clothing, that's definitely a thing with you.
That's an inside joke we'll get to later.
But you know, I think that really fits it as you've gone in your journey in life.
Yes.
Of these different masks and the power of love in your life as you deal with it. So,
All right.
what is your full legal name?
My government name?
Yes.
Ronald Lee Hicks.
Ronald?
But that, only when I'm in trouble or when I'm signing my name do I do that whole thing, Ronald Lee Hicks. I started out in life as Ronnie. Ronnie, because that's what my family called me. Wow. So I was Ronnie.
I just got to say, because you're Ron to me.
Yeah.
Ronnie
doesn't fit, does it?
Well,
or does it?
The Ronnie I think of, I knew another Ronnie. Both Ronnies I know are black.
Okay.
But the one I think of most immediately is an older black lady.
Okay.
And it's really funny thinking of you as an older black lady.
I am an older black lady trapped in a white man's body.
Oh, man. Oh, that's a whole
That's
other
a different show, isn't it?
So, I know you as Ron, but you were originally Ronnie.
Ronnie is
about
what
that.
my family called me. My father was in the military. He started out as an enlisted man. Funny story about that, just very quickly. He had to join the military instead of going to prison because he had faced his second felony assault. He came from a very, very poor family, was a Native American who was living in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and so people tend to pick on whoever it is that is the minority.
Yeah.
And so he got picked on. He ended up stabbing two different people, just defending literally his clothing. Like I stepped on his shoes, and so the judge is like, join the military, or go to prison. That was a no-brainer. Yeah. But it was during Vietnam. So he went to Vietnam, I think the first time, maybe as an enlisted guy, came back, said, hey, this isn't for me. I'm going to go to OCS, Army, the military, officer. And he had to get a special permission because he had felonies and ended up getting that, became an officer. So we grew up in a military family. Okay. And so we traveled all over the world. I've lived 12 and a half years over in Europe. And when my dad got out of the military, I joined the military, was in for 10 and a half years. And so I began life living in multi-ethnic, multicultural places. We lived in France. We lived in Germany. I've lived in Germany 6.5 years. I lived in Italy. I've been on every continent except North America. Antarctica.
Aren't we in North America right now, Ron?
Antarctica. And just have lived a great life. And Ronnie is what my family always called me.
Okay.
When I joined the military, I became Hicks.
Oh.
Because in the military, you just call everybody by your last name.
Yeah.
Right. So I was Hicks for a while, 10 years, 7 months in the United States Army. Interesting, though, because we grew up in a military family, it was not unusual to see a black soldier marry to a German woman. Yeah. So multi-ethnic relationships, my dad retired from the military in 1976. So in the 70s and the 60s, I was used to that, a white soldier marrying a Korean woman. All of us kids played together And when my dad got out of the military in '76, we moved to a small town here in Kentucky. I won't say it just because it sounds like I'm going to disparage it, and I'm not. But it was '76, and there was a beautiful black girl who I wanted to take to the prom.
I will say, wait a minute. Okay, pause for a second, because the way you were describing young ladies earlier today, when we were, having coffee and stuff, you didn't say beautiful or pretty.
What did I say?
Hot.
Hot. Okay. Well, she was a hot a black girl. All right. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to ask this girl to the prom. I want to get to know her better. She and I were the only two in the whole city that thought that was a good idea. She got pressure from her community. I got pressure from my community, like pickup truck fulls of guys out in front of my house who wanted to be able to try to teach me a lesson. And she finally said, hey, listen, there's too much heat. We just can't do this sort of a thing. Yeah. And so then I decided, hey, let me go off to college. College just wasn't for me. I'm not very studious. You and I have talked earlier. Math is a foreign language to me.
And this was all still the Ballad of Ronnie, because even in that time,
yes, in that time I was still Ronnie.
You were still Ronnie,
right? Then I joined the Army, and in the Army it's Hicks. Okay. Hicks, right? There was no more Ronnie. It was Hicks.
Wait, pause before you get to the military with Hicks. You've said to me a couple of times that, imagine what it's like growing up with that last name.
Well, it rhymes with certain words.
Yeah.
And so when my dad got out of the military and we moved back to the small town Kentucky, we're in history class and we're talking about Versailles, not Versailles, but Versailles, France. And I'm like, hey, yeah, I've been to that castle. And then Neuschwanstein, which is the replica of the Disney Disney castle is a replica of the Neuschwanstein castle. I'm like, yeah, I've toured that castle. And then I realized very quickly, I was just sharing my life experience. To them, I was, you hillbillies, you rednecks, and all the rest of that. And so my entire junior year, at least 3 times a week, I got in a fight. One, I was the only male who was new from the first grade all the way to the junior class. I wasn't Don Juan, but I wasn't Quasimodo either, and so I dated all these girls who failed to tell me that they had been with the same boy since the 3rd grade. And also, it made no difference what your ethnicity was. If you were a pretty girl, I wanted to date you. And so crossing those boundaries, I got in trouble for that, got in fights all the time. So my parents decided, well, we're going to take you out of that school, and we're going to send you to the county school. Well, when I went to the county school, that's the guy that fights all the time. So all the guys in the county school had to figure out where I fit in the pecking order. And so I had a pretty rough junior and senior year of high school. And you don't do that. You don't fight every single week without getting good at it. And so after a while, I was the troublemaker that was, whose
nickname rhymes with Hicks.
Yes, exactly. And so
was it weird when you went into military having that be a name that you embraced? Or were you always okay? Like, Hicks is me.
Yeah, I was
you guys can make fun of it all you want to. I know what it really means.
Yes,
and so you go in the military and you're like, I'm the new Hicks because my dad was here before.
Yeah, I mean, it never really bothered me. To me, really, I thought, that's so easy. Yeah. If that's the best insult you could come up with, then why are you wasting my time? It really. And so it didn't bother me. But let me back up a little bit. When I was younger, the expression "sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." That's a lie from the pits of hell. I'm telling you, because words do hurt you. Yeah. But after a while, I realized, okay, that's such low hanging fruit to rhyme my name with a body part. You know, and that's the best you can come up with. Come on. Now in the military, you're men now. Yeah. The military doesn't make you a man; it brings the man out of you. Okay. If you're male, and so that was just, you realize there's boundaries you don't cross, and so now I'm Hicks. Yeah. And I joined the military to learn a trade, become proficient at it. I thought if it takes 20 years, I'll do 20. And so I was at the spot midway where I had to either re-enlist or get out. And I thought, hey, I've learned a skill. I'm proficient at it. The military, I received numerous awards, in medals in that particular line. And so I got out.
What was your rank?
I got out as a sergeant.
Okay.
I wanted to go enlisted, but I wanted to go officer, but they said you can, but you can no longer work in that field. And I'm like, well, I've been an instructor in this field, and I instructed the Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marines. So all of the branches of the service came to the radio and television school in Denver, Colorado, and so I want to go OCS. Okay, but you have to leave radio and television.
Leave everything, all the career that you've been building up.
Exactly,
is a waste of time.
That's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer. And so we were living in Italy at the time. We'd been here for 3 years. And so when I separated, I literally separated from Italy, came back to the States, and the first restaurant my parents took me to was Pizza Hut. Huh. Now, Italy, pizzas.
Yeah.
Right? And the gal says, what would you like? And I'm like, surprise me. Just whatever, surprise me. First time we went out to eat, my oldest son at the time was still, kind of young, and he ordered spaghetti, and the waitress laughed, and he said, Dad, I didn't tell her what kind of spaghetti I want. And I'm like, son, we're in America now.
Yeah. You're in America now. There's only one kind of
spaghetti.
There's only
one kind of spaghetti here. And so I got out of the military, and I was fully going to open up a video production company, but God had other plans for me, and we'll get to that later on. But I think through providence, for the first year, I mean, I had a business loan, had a business plan, had it all worked out, saved money. I was paying my own salary for a year, and I had lined up some businesses, and a small low-power TV station in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, called me one day and said, hey, we got your resume from a company we do business with. We'd like for you to come up and look at our operation. And I did. And I thought, oh, man, these people need they need help. And so long story short, I said, I'm not interested at all. And no, I can't help you out. I got my own gig going on. And, they made an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I said, I'll work with you for a year. And that's it, just 1 year.
Yeah.
11 years later,
You're still?
I resigned from that position.
Yeah.
We won numerous awards as the low-power TV station of the year. People from all over the country came and saw what our operation was. I designed and built a mobile live truck with the help of the other engineers.
What was your title at the TV
station? Chief Engineer.
So another name, Chief Engineer.
Chief Engineer.
Chief Engineer of
TV 43 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Okay, Chief Engineer of TV 43 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Yes, and then I had hair down to my waist, beard, earrings, and I had done in the military a lot of on-air stuff. I did, radio shows. I could shoot and edit, and I put together. I actually won an award in the Army for a story that I shot and I edited and voiced and all the rest of that sort of stuff because I just had the opportunity to do those things. And I'm always, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And so when our news director position opened up, I said to my boss, I said, "Hey, I'd like to do this." And he said, "Well, you got to cut your hair." And I'm saying, "Okay." But I had already decided. I talked to my wife. Hey, been here, done this. Going to cut my hair. Well, he was shocked. He threw out this ultimatum that he realized I would. In his mind, he didn't think I would do.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And he said, well, we'll give it a shot. And so I was a news director for a couple of years at TV 43, and also chief engineer.
Okay,
so changed names.
Chief engineer and news director. And short hair guy.
Yeah, and I used to be known because during that time I had surrendered to the ministry, and so I was known as the long-haired preacher. Okay. And when I cut my hair, I thought, hey, I won't be known as a long-haired preacher anymore. Now I was known as the guy who used to be the long-haired preacher.
You're like Prince, who he was symbol.
Exactly.
But it's artist formerly known as Prince.
Formerly known as Prince, but how do you pronounce that symbol?
Yeah.
So at one time, I had the title of chief engineer, news director, Brother Ron, because that's what they call pastors in this area, and I also taught a class at Christian County High School.
Yeah, that's right. That's something that we have in common.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that we have escaped from teaching at Christian County High School.
Well, I dug it, but the very first day I came home and told my wife, whatever teachers make, they ought to add a 0 to the end of it. I don't think parents realize what goes on in a high school. The level I experienced of complete lack of authority. I mean, complete lack of respect for an authority figure. Yeah, I had students challenge me physically.
Okay, so let's
go ahead.
Let's
dig
into this. So what year was this that you what school year was it that you were teacher?
I'm
80s,
horrible
90s?
with that. No, it was.
I think it'd be 90s. I think
maybe even early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
You know what? I'm so bad with that sort of stuff but
your kids were still in the house.
Actually, my son, who is in his 40s now, was in my class as a senior in high school. So that 30 years ago.
Okay.
Good gracious.
So looking like
30 years
so
ago.
looking at 90s.
Dude.
All right. So in the 90s.
In the 90s, I was a
teacher Ron. So that means you'd be Mr. Hicks.
I still had long hair.
Okay. So Mr. Hicks, long-haired, and you taught what?
Long hair. I taught, they had a video production class.
Okay. So Mr. Hicks, long-haired video production teacher at Christian County High School in the 90s. Let's talk about that name.
Okay.
What was that experience? Because I've heard some stories from this.
Oh, no.
From you. These are your
yes,
personal stories.
Yes.
But share some of this. Like, what was that experience like?
It was eye-opening because I was the only male on the hallway. And so when fights would take place, before I was there, it was always, hey, just there's female teachers, so let's go to that hallway for fights. Well, when I was in the military, I sidelined as a bouncer. And so, because I was proficient, and I'm not trying to present myself as anything more than what I am.
But you were trained in high school how to fight.
Exactly. Exactly. And I, and carried that on into adulthood and was able to, convince people either with words or actions, it's time for you to leave.
Yeah.
And so, the two high school kids going at it was not any sort of a threatening environment. And so I would break up the fights in the hallways and I would do it differently. One time I ran and I had heard as I was running down the hallway that a kid was beating up another kid who had picked on a special needs child. And I thought to myself, well, he deserves to get smacked around. I'm not suggesting that that's right. I'm not suggesting that was the right thought. So I started walking, instead of running, and I broke the fight up, and I could see who the aggressor was and who the defender was, and I wrapped my arm around one of the guys, and I whispered in his ear. I said, "My name is Mr. Hicks. I'm a teacher here. You hit me, and you're through." And he kind of looked up at me. And then the female teachers gathered up and they blah, 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 blah. I'm like, ladies, I've got it handled. And so as we're walking to the office, I'm like, dude, he may have deserved to get smacked around, and he's with me. And I'm like, and if you picked on a special needs kid, in high school, that would have happened in my high school as well. But you can't do that here. Go out back like we used to do. And these guys are looking at me like, are you sure you're a teacher?
Speaking of going out back, I think you were the one who told me stories when you were in high school of sneaking out, or not sneaking out, but having there was a smoking section for students when you were in high school or something?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you were in the 7th and 8th grade, you needed permission from your parents to go to the smoking area. Have you ever seen the movie with Denzel Washington? Is it Remember the Titans?
Hey, just because I'm black, I don't know all Denzel Washington. No, I actually don't. For those guys who don't know us, Ron and I have that kind of relationship.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah. He's a football coach in Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay.
In the movie, there's a incorrect statement in the beginning of the movie. It says that T.C. Williams High School, where he coached, was the first integrated high school in Virginia. I went to Hayfield High School. It was integrated, and so I was literally at the real live game where he actually. I was the drum major of the 8th grade band, and we were at the game where T.C. Williams played Hayfield High School, which is the opening scene in the movie that Denzel Washington is in.
Now, and in 8th grade, did you have the parents' permission slip to go outside and smoke?
No, but I snuck into the smoking area. But once you were in the 9th grade, you didn't need permission anymore. So I got stabbed one time in the high school smoking area. But we would go in there and we would smoke, and we thought we were so cool, I started smoking when I was in the 6th grade, and 7th and 8th grade smoked in high school, and then on, and then when we moved to Kentucky, tobacco. Yeah, we'd stand out in front of the high school smoking, sometimes cigarettes, and if
you are listening, that is the thing with Ron. You got to pay attention because he throws in jokes like that.
Well, I've not always been a preacher.
Yeah,
and so marijuana for the years was the #1 cash crop in the state of Kentucky, and so
and hemp is coming back as a cash crop in Kentucky.
Yeah, it wasn't hemp. Though.
Yeah, I know it wasn't hemp, but it's coming. Essentially the same plant with slightly different chemical compound.
Yes,
is coming back.
None of the intoxicants are in there, but we'd stand out front smoking and then go on in the school. It was a part of everyday culture, and so when I joined the military, then. And I became Hicks, and I entered the military. I ran track and cross country in high school. I was 6 foot tall. I weighed 146 pounds. Yep. I got out of basic training and I weighed 160 pounds. And I put on that amount of muscle, and I thought, hey, I like this. And so I became a gym rat, and I started lifting weights, and I started eating 5 meals a day, and I got pretty muscular. I've got this sort of a frame where from the waist up, I can put on muscle mass pretty quick. From the waist down, I look like I'm riding a chicken.
So now we're talking about a time of you as a weightlifting, not quite bodybuilder, but just
could have been if my genetics were
athletic guy.
Yes, yes. I mean, people could tell. I mean, one time I walked into a club, and the bouncer walked over and said, "We're not going to have any trouble tonight, are we?" And I thought to myself, as far as a guy goes, I'm like, you know, I wanted to thump my chest and all the rest of that sort of stuff because you could tell.
Yeah.
I was a big guy.
Yeah.
And so that persona, you know, because I had to learn how to fight in high school, but now people look at the size of me, you know, and I was muscular and the way I carried myself and all the rest of it. I was like, oh, this guy could be trouble. And again, I'm not trying to brag.
No, but and you don't have to keep saying that, Ron, because
Right.
like I told you earlier, this episode is all about you and talking about you. Like finally, we're here.
Well, you've never heard this story, have you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have not heard about you as
Right.
as the weightlifting guy, but I mean, it isn't about bragging so much as saying these are the
is who I
different
was,
these are the different
right.
names that you've been. These are the
Right.
different aspects of you. Because we all are unique individuals.
Well, and
but not everybody can tell their story.
Right. Well, one time in a military formation, a guy from the medical department came, and he's looking in the formation, and he picked me and he picked another guy because we were the two biggest guys in formation, and we had to guard a prisoner who was in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. We were stationed in Germany, and basically they said, look, if this guy does anything out of line, beat him.
Okay.
Right? Because he's criminally insane. He had killed his wife and done all these
And the
other
solution
things.
back then, this is the 80s.
Yeah.
And in the military in the 80s, the way you control psychologically unhinged soldiers is you beat them into submission.
You beat them into submission, right?
All right.
And we were given permission to do that. Now we didn't have to because he realized we would do that. You know, hey, you be cool, we'll be cool. If you're not, we're going to wear you out.
Yeah.
And I was picked specifically because of my size, and so you know we go through the military, and I was involved. I played softball. You know, was in the gym all the time, and during that time, I also developed a significant a significant drinking habit. I was a full-blown, full-fledged alcoholic.
So we've talked about Ronnie. And we've talked about Hicks. And we've talked about,
Mr. Hicks in school.
Mr. Hicks and Sergeant and what was it? Chief Engineer?
Chief Engineer, News Director, right.
News Director.
But while I was in
and then also
military.
smoker. We've talked a little bit about being a smoker.
Smoking, yeah.
But now let's talk about alcoholic.
Yeah. Well, and when I first entered the military, like when I was a teenager, I didn't drink because you could smell it on your breath.
Yeah.
But any drug that you want to do, you can't smell that on your breath. And so,
thanks for giving the kids tips out there, Ron.
well,
substance abuse tip brought to you by Brother Ron.
Ron Hicks. But so drinking for me was out.
Yeah.
But every drug that there was, I tried. Well, when I entered the military, they like, hey, we do urinalysis randomly, and I'm like, well, you can't do drugs anymore.
No. But you can drink.
You can drink, and not only is that acceptable, they insist upon it, right?
Yeah.
And so I became absolutely full blown, and without exaggeration, I was drunk every day for 10 years. I'm not boasting.
Yeah.
I say that shame.
Were you like an angry drunk or mellow drunk?
No,
You just were a functioning alcoholic?
I was a functioning alcoholic, and the thing about it is I never looked for trouble, but if trouble found me, I would accommodate. You know, no big deal. Hey, we could drink, we can fight. It doesn't make any difference. Whatever you want to do, I'm game, right?
Yeah.
But I never looked for trouble. But in that process, functional alcoholics think they're functional, but I wasn't really. I wasn't fulfilling any of my obligations to my family, to my wife, to my sons, and it was a bad period to the point where my wife one day said, I'm leaving you.
Yeah.
I'm not divorcing you, but I'm leaving you. I did not sign up for this.
Wow.
I walked into my office. My wife is in my boss's office. I'm like, what's going on? I started to walk over there, and there was 4 guys in front of the doorway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys got to get out of the way. And they're like, Hicks, we've been told whatever it takes to keep you out of here. And they pointed to the secretary who was talking to the military police. And she said, hang on, I don't know if you need to come yet. And I realized they're serious.
Yeah.
And so I went to my office, and then as my wife is leaving, I come, like, can you at least tell me what's going on? She goes, I'm leaving. We get plane tickets. We're going back to the States and all the rest of that. And so the very thing I thought I wanted, freedom to be able to do what I wanted to do. I'm a grown man. You can't tell me what to do. When the reality of that hit me in the face, and I realized the strength that it took from my wife to be able to do that. And she told me, she said, I'm going to wait for you, and I hope I can wait long enough until you're sober. I hope that when you get sober, I'll still be here for you. And I thought, that's heavy.
Yeah.
And that's courage. And so I said, well, if you'll just give me another chance, I'll never touch alcohol again. That was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And to date, I haven't.
And she's still with you.
42 years we've been married for 40, but that was at the 10-year spot. So now I'm Sergeant Hicks, the functioning alcoholic, and I was one of these guys that got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a drunk, and that's been controlling me, and I'm a big grown man, and I need to control it.
I want to talk about that a little bit because so I know some, and again with this show, the idea is that this is about your way of looking at life, right? This is who you are,
right?
And so I'm saying this because I don't want you to feel like you need to censor who you are.
Sure,
okay,
sure.
Your view. Do you need to get the phone?
No. I'm sorry. My phone is buzzing. I'm sorry, listeners. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna make sure because if you need to, it's all right.
No, we're good.
All right. You hear that? Whoever you were calling just now, this is more important than you. No. But so when we've talked about identity and things like that,
Yes,
identity politics, identity and religion, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
We talked about you being an alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic.
Right.
How would you feel about somebody saying to you, "Hey, Ron, it's been more than 3 decades, but you are still an alcoholic. You just don't drink anymore."
Right.
What do you say to that? Do you say this is a name you still carry, or this is a name that you carried but you no longer carry?
I'm no longer an alcoholic.
Okay.
And for somebody working at that 12-step program right now, if you need to hang on to that title to be able to work your sobriety, then good for you. But I'm not going to impose a title on you. You have no right to impose a title on me.
All right.
Kind of, we'll move a little bit into the pastor realm. If the Son has set you free, I'm free indeed. I'm no longer bound. I'm no longer. I was an alcoholic. I am no longer because I've been set free from that. Now, having said that, I can never touch alcohol again.
Yeah.
I can't be a social drinker and all the rest of that because I have no control over that.
Yeah.
Other than I tell people this, I can keep from having one beer.
Yeah.
I can't keep from having 40.
I get it. I
just don't drink one, but that doesn't mean I'm an alcoholic. I know my limitations, you know. There's certain foods I can't eat because they don't sit well with me. I'm not a Brussels sproutaholic. You know what I'm saying? I just realized.
I have a daughter who's a mushroomaholic. She loves
exactly.
mushrooms, and not the kind you're thinking of, Ron.
Right, okay. No, I wasn't
She's loving the kind that you buy in the grocery store, okay?
Right.
But no, I think that's an important clarification. So I didn't share this with you just now, and I might have talked to you before, but one of the things that got me feeling like doing this podcast was a chapel service I went to when I was over at Princeton, where they dedicated the whole thing looking at Judges 19 and that story of the concubine who was, just essentially abused to death and dismembered.
Yes.
If you don't know that story, it's in Judges 19. I'm not making this up. And just talking about...
They cut her into 12 pieces, sent a piece to each one of the 12 tribes.
Dismembered. And the idea of saying that she goes unnamed in the whole story and talking about the names we carry. But at the end of the service, they had this amazing part where we were given notepads, little papers to write names that we carry that we wish we didn't, to put into a jar. And they said, we're not going to read these. We're going to take these and burn these.
Burn these. Oh, what a great thing.
You've surrendered this name. And so I'm glad we talked because this is a name that you've done that with. You say, hey, I carried this name. This name has serious scars and effects on my relationship, but I am no longer this name.
Yeah, I'm not identified. And, I appreciate the fact that you use scars because, I'm fast forwarding now. I have a preacher. I'm a preacher now.
Yeah.
And a pastor, a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And, when Jesus appeared after his resurrection, he appeared before the disciples, all except for Thomas. And Thomas had traveled with these dudes, but Judas has already betrayed him. How in the world has that happened? And he said he was going to come back to life, but none of the disciples were at the tomb on the third day waiting for him to come. And Thomas was like, look, guys, fine. You've seen, I'm not going to believe until I see. I want to touch the scars in his hand. I want to put my hand literally in his side. Unless I do that, I'm not going to believe. Well, so Jesus showed up and he goes, okay, boom, here they are. Yeah. And Thomas never even had to touch him. He just had to see him. Well, Jesus ascended into heaven. The scriptures say now we're the body of Christ. Yeah. There are people today, 2,023 years later, that will say, I'm not going to believe unless I see the scars. Well, you and I have scars. Yeah. If we're the body of Christ, we need to show our scars to be able to say, here, let me show you. But for us, our scars represent healing. Yeah. They don't represent wounds. They represent healing because this is how I've been healed. This is how I've been restored. And so my scars don't define me, but they are a part of my story. Yeah. So being an alcoholic doesn't define me.
So I have another quote then that I think will tie in good for talking about you and the title pastor that you carry. This one, I actually did use this one in my other interview with Alyssa, but it really does tie in. Gabor Mate says, trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in
how
the
we
absence
react.
of an empathetic witness.
Yes. Yes.
And so as a pastor, you deal a lot with not just your trauma and scars and the trauma you've done, but you also do deal with the trauma of others around you.
Yes.
So what is Pastor Ron, Brother Ron, like who is this person with this title?
And here's the crazy thing is in this realm, I actually have several titles.
Okay.
If I meet somebody and they say, "Hey, Rev,"
Okay.
then I've met them in prison.
All right.
Not that I've been in prison, but I've met them by ministering down in jail, and they call me Rev.
Okay.
So, hey, Rev, how you doing? Hey, man, how long you been out? You know, and all that sort of stuff. You got any time on the shelf? You know, how you're free? And if they call me Chap or Padre or something, it's because of my work with the police department as a chaplain with the police department.
All right.
Brother Ron is because they are familiar, you know, in the Southern Baptist tradition,
in the
as
formal
being a
church
pastor.
realm,
exactly. And then sometimes pastor, they don't have a relationship with me, but they know that I'm a preacher. So it's like, oh, hey, Pastor Ron, okay, you know I'm a preacher, you know where I come from, but we don't have a relationship. So Pastor, Rev, Chap, and Brother Ron.
So is there a name or a title you would give to who you are, this ministry role you play, because you're full time in this vocational ministry role? What would you say is the title, the name you carry? If you have a singular way of putting it, or how you think of yourself in this ministry role?
When I introduce myself to people, I'll say my name is Ron. People at church call me Brother Ron. I'm not a titles guy. Ron is fine, but Brother Ron often, you know, like the viewers can't see me now, but I have full sleeves tattoos. And in the tattoo parlor where I go, and I have another appointment very shortly to get more ink therapy is what I call it.
One of these days you got to hook me, because you have the best that I've seen as far as local people. And my wife and I need to go to the same guy you go to.
Yeah, well, and it'll take you months to get in because he's so booked up. But I introduced myself as Ron to him.
All right.
And
so
the course,
so then to you, Ron, that's who
me,
you are.
right.
You are Ron,
I'm Ron.
and Ron is this minister of the gospel, who Rev, pastor, brother.
Yes.
You know.
But the curious thing is it was just through going there and hanging out with these guys and all, because I like to be able to meet interesting people, and tattoo artists are interesting people, and you know I've not always come from a milquetoast sort of environment, and so hey, there's a bunch of freaks over there. Let me get to know them because I'm a freak too, right? And so you know, eventually it's, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, what does that mean? And boom, I've got an in, and I talk to him. And so now when I go in there, they go, hey, Brother Ron, how you doing? I've never asked them to call me Brother Ron.
So they just absorb that naturally into it.
Yeah, because in this culture, you call a preacher brother or pastor or whatever. And so, you know, I walk in and Brother Ron. And what's curious, walking into a tattoo shop, and the tattoo artist said, hey, Brother Ron, and the look on the faces of the people who are like, wait a minute, a preacher's in here? What? It's almost like the bad guy walking into the saloon and in a Western where everybody stops and music stops. And they're like,
playing piano, stop.
Exactly. But they're like, okay, all the tattoo artists are saying, hey, man, how you doing? And all the rest of that. So he must be cool, but he's a preacher up in here. And then they look at me and they're like, and he's got tattoos? You know, what kind of I've never encountered. And then when I say I'm a Southern Baptist, like, no.
Yeah, which is interesting. So for my wife and I being from Southern California originally, it's not uncommon out west for pastors, preachers to have tattoos. It's a whole different world out that way.
Right.
But we are in Kentucky. We're in the South.
Right.
And here it's a different world.
Well, I got my first tattoo when I was 18. I got my second tattoo when I was 19. I got my third tattoo when I was 50-something. And I've always told my kids, if you ever get two, you're going to want as many as you can. And I just had the means to be able to do it, and I thought I'm going to get those things that I wanted to have done. And I realized that's not for everybody. And there are a lot of times if I go and visit a church, I wear long sleeves, you know, because I don't want to. I don't want people to tune me out when they first see me. Now with my hair, I was invited one time. A pastor had heard about me, and I work well with kids, and he wanted me to come and speak at a youth event. And so as he should have. He called me and said, I'd like to be able to sit down, I'd like to hear what you're going to say. And when I walked in, he looked at me and he goes, you can't speak it. You can't. And I'm like, why? And he said, well, the Bible talks about law, in my opinion, a complete and total misinterpretation. But he was a shepherd of that flock. I respected his position. I'm like, okay, good. And well, and everybody's like, weren't you offended? I'm like, I'm offended because this guy's trying to protect this flock using the doctrine. I don't have to agree with the doctrine, but no, man, it's a stand-up dude. He's protecting his folks. I don't have a beef with that guy. No, I'm not offended. They said, no, you go, man. I'll probably run into his kids now as adults, and that's okay, and I got short hair now. So
so they're good with you now. From their point of view, you've reformed.
Yeah, there you go. I'm reformed.
Well, I've got one more title to ask you about for this segment with you. Do you identify as American?
Well,
because I'll be honest, like of all the veterans that I know, I think you're one of the few veterans that I don't think of you as being un-American at all. Mm-hmm. But I can't recall us ever having a conversation of you talking about your Americanness, as it were. So I think that's a question I would like. I'm curious. So do you view yourself as, like, do you say American? That's a title I hold, a name I carry.
Yes, but there's I have one of those identifiers, those hyphenated Americans. I'm Native American.
I was going to talk about the next segment.
Okay. Yes, but I'm certainly American.
Yeah.
I am American through and through. But just to make sure, my Americanism doesn't make me a Christian, and making me a Christian doesn't make me American, but I am true blue, red, white, and blue American, and I have experienced the greatness of this country because I've lived all over the world by God's grace and with my dad. So I've seen the rest of the way the world does it. And if I had any place to pick in the world that I could live, it'd be America. Yeah, because I dig the way we do it here.
Yeah, and what is that? What is being American for Ronald Lee Hicks?
My government name.
What does it mean? What does it mean to Ron what does it mean to you to be an American?
I can be whatever I want to be. All right. The notion of hard work, the notion of education, the notion of you got to put in to get. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes doors are going to be shut. But if you're persistent, you can be. I mean, for Pete's sakes, look at me. I'm a former alcoholic, drug addict, and I'm a pastor of a Southern Baptist church in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, with tattoos all over my arms. And I say to people, if God could use a knucklehead like me, there's no telling what he could do with you. Yeah. So being American is the land of opportunity. I mean, people risk their lives to get here, and I understand that. Right. And I'm proud that we offer that.
Awesome. Well,
in most cases.
And for our next one, what I'm planning on looking at for anybody listening, if anybody listens, I don't know if anybody's listening. It could just be you and me, Ron.
You and I are listening to each other, right? But that's all right.
But I'm looking at, we're going to explore, like you talked about, I know that you have Native American identity.
Yes.
So there's a title associated there.
Yes.
I'm also going to look at, we haven't talked at all about Ron as the husband or father.
No.
Or even as a son.
Right.
And so those are things that I'm going to have us explore next.
Dude,
okay.
I love it.
So if you happen to listen to us, tune in to the next one.
All right.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution, organization, or corporation. The material and information presented here are for general information purposes only. All persons who participated did so of their own free will and speak for themselves only, regardless of any personal affiliations they may possess. A podcast about names and other stuff is a production of Salt.Light.Love Ministries. All rights reserved.